Millionaire finds a woman and kids hiding out in his old home. And what does he do next? Alexander Harris took a deep breath, seeing the rusty gate of the property he hadn't visited in over 15 years. At 42, the businessman had become one of the wealthiest men in the Silicon Valley. But that simple house in rural California represented everything he wanted to forget about his humble childhood. Now he needed to sell the land for a huge real estate development that promised to multiply his net worth. The woman who appeared at the door was clearly terrified and tried to hide a boy behind her. Alexander noticed the faded fabric of her pink dress and the protective way she held a small child in her arms, while a little girl clung to her dirty skirt. She couldn't hide the panic in her brown eyes when she realized they'd been caught. "Please, sir, I can explain," the woman said with a trembling voice. "How did you get in here?" Alexander asked, trying to keep his cool while looking at the state of the house that was supposed to be empty. The woman lowered her head, holding the child in her arms even tighter. "I'm Patricia. Patricia Nelson. The house looked abandoned for years. We had nowhere else to go." Alexander looked past her and noticed that the living room, once covered in dust and cobwebs, now showed signs of life. There were rags hanging on a makeshift clothesline, some kitchen utensils organized on an old table, and mattresses laid out on the floor. The smell of simple food was coming from the kitchen. "How long have you been living here?" he asked, still processing the situation. 3 months. Patricia replied, her voice almost a whisper. The boy in her arms couldn't have been more than 3 years old, with dark hair and big eyes that watched Alexander with curiosity. The girl, looking about 6 years old, stayed hidden behind her mother, spying on him suspiciously. "Listen, I understand you were in need, but this property is being sold," said Alexander, trying to sound firm but not cruel. "You can't stay here." Patricia closed her eyes for a moment as if she were gathering courage. "You're the owner, right? I always knew someone would come someday. I just didn't think it would be so soon." What did she mean she always knew? The neighbors said the house belonged to a family from rural California and that the son had gotten rich and never came back. Alexander felt a tightness in his chest. It was true that he had fled that place as soon as he could. The memories of his poor childhood, of his mother fighting alone to raise him after his father abandoned them, of suffering hunger and cold in this very house. Those were things he preferred to bury in the past. "Well, I'm back now," he said, drier than he intended. Patricia took a step forward, still holding the boy. "Sir, I know we have no rights here, but is there any way you could give us a week? Just 1 week for me to find another place?" 1 week. Alexander hesitated. He was in a rush to close the deal, but something about that woman's desperate determination made him pause. "Please, I promise we'll leave without causing any trouble. It's just that..." Her voice cracked. "It's just that right now I have nowhere to take them." Alexander looked at the 2 children. The little boy had settled comfortably into Patricia's arms and was watching him with interest while the girl was still acting shy. They looked well cared for, even with their simple, patched-up clothes. "Are they your children?" "They're my siblings," Patricia replied, her voice holding a mix of pride and sadness. "I've been looking after them since we were left all alone." Alexander felt a knot tighten in his stomach. There was something about this situation that stirred up memories he'd been trying to keep locked away. "All right," he finally said. 1 week. But after that, you'll have to leave." The relief on Patricia's face was instant and heartbreaking. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You won't regret this." "Alexander. My name is Alexander Harris." "Thank you, Mr. Alexander." He took one last look at the house and the 3 figures in the doorway before turning to leave. As he walked back to the car, he couldn't get the image out of his head. The image of Patricia holding those kids like they were the most precious things in the world. On the way back to Los Angeles, Alexander called his lawyer. "Mr. Sanders, I need to postpone the sale of the Bakersfield property for a week. Is there a problem, Alexander? The buyer is anxious to close the deal." "Just a few things I need to sort out first. 1 week won't make a difference." But even as he said it, Alexander knew he was lying to himself. Something had changed that afternoon, and he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to hit the like button and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now let's continue. 2 days later, Alexander found himself driving back to Bakersfield without any real reason. He told himself he needed to check if the family was keeping their end of the deal, but deep down he knew there was something else. The house had a strange pull on him like a magnet dragging him back to the past he was trying so hard to avoid. When he arrived, he found Patricia hanging clothes on a makeshift line in the yard. She was wearing that same pink dress, but now he noticed it was clean and neatly pressed. The kids were playing nearby with toys made from scraps, tin can cars, and a rag doll that looked hand-sewn. "Mr. Alexander," Patricia exclaimed, clearly surprised. "Did something happen?" "No, I just came to see how things are going." In truth, he wanted to understand how this woman had turned that old house into a home. Even with so few resources, everything was organized and clean. Wildflowers were planted in old tin cans, and the windows were thrown open, letting the sunlight pour in. "Would you like to come in? I just made coffee," Patricia offered. Alexander hesitated, but eventually agreed. Inside the house was unrecognizable. Patricia had fixed up the old furniture. From storage hung curtains made from scraps in the windows, and even created a little study corner for the girl with books stacked on a wooden table. "Where did you get those books?" Alexander asked, recognizing some of the titles. "They were in a trunk in the attic," Patricia answered, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "They must be from when someone used to live here. Sophia loves reading, so I thought it wouldn't hurt." Alexander picked up one of the books. It was a copy of The Little Prince that he had been given for his birthday when he turned 8. His mother had saved up for months to buy it. On the first page, his childish handwriting was still there. "Alexander Harris, 2nd grade. This book is mine," he mumbled mostly to himself. "Sorry." Patricia appeared, looking worried. "I didn't know. Sophia, come here." The little girl appeared shy and still leery of Alexander. "Sophia, these books belonged to Mr. Alexander when he was a boy. You need to give them back." "No," said Alexander quickly. "That's not necessary. She can keep them." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Can I really, sir?" "Oh, yes. And just call me Alexander." Patricia smiled for the first time since he had met her. "Sophia is learning to read by herself. I teach her what I can." "But didn't you go to school?" "I went until 4th grade. After my parents died, I had to work to take care of the little ones." Alexander watched Patricia while she spoke. There was a dignity in her posture that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. She wasn't asking for pity, just explaining the facts. "And what do you do for work now?" "At night when they're asleep, I sew clothes for a shop in the city. It's not much, but it's enough for the basics." Alexander noticed the old sewing machine in the corner of the living room, surrounded by fabrics and threads organized in shoeboxes. "That is a lot of work for just one person," he commented. "We get by," Patricia replied simply. "We have always gotten by." The little boy Patricia had introduced as Michael walked up to Alexander with curiosity. Without fear, he held out a tin car to the man. "Play with me." Alexander looked at the rough toy and then into the boy's trusting eyes. It had been years since a child had approached him so naturally. In his life as an executive, he hardly ever spent time with families. "I don't know how to play very well," he admitted. "It's easy," said Michael, sitting on the floor and making the car go. Vroom, vroom. Almost without realizing it, Alexander found himself sitting on the wooden floor of the living room, pushing tin cars with a 3-year-old boy. Patricia watched them from the kitchen with a discreet smile. "How old are you guys?" Alexander asked Sophia, who had come closer shyly. "I am 7. Michael is 3, and Patricia is 27, but she looks older because she gets tired," the girl answered with the typical honesty of children. Patricia blushed a little. "Sophia." "But it's true," the girl insisted. "You stay up all night sewing." Alexander looked at Patricia with more attention. Now that Sophia had mentioned it, he noticed the faint dark circles the hands dry from work, the way she moved as if carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. "Are you guys eating well?" he asked without thinking. "Of course we are," Patricia replied a bit on the defensive. "I take good care of them." "That's not what I meant." We don't need charity, Mr. Alexander, she said more firmly. We just needed a temporary roof. The answer surprised him. In fact, it surprised him positively. In his business world, he was used to people who always wanted something from him. Patricia was different. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. You didn't. She softened her tone. It's just, I've learned that you have to keep your dignity, no matter the situation. Michael tugged at the hem of Alexander's pants. Uncle Alexander, are you coming back tomorrow? The question took Alexander by surprise. No one had called him uncle in years. I don't know, maybe. I want you to come back, Michael said with the disarming sincerity of a child. Alexander felt something strange in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. When he left the house that afternoon, he took with him the image of Patricia saying goodbye, at the door with the two children by her side. And for the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to the next day. The next morning, Alexander canceled 2 meetings and drove back to Bakersfield. This time he brought some toys he'd bought at a store on the way. Nothing too expensive, just some coloring books and pencils for Sophia and a toy truck for Michael. When Patricia opened the door and saw the gifts, her expression hardened. Don Alexander, I already told you I don't want charity. He interrupted her. It's a thank you for taking such good care of the house. It was a lie, but a kind one. A lie that allowed Patricia to accept it without hurting her pride. The children are going to be very happy, she finally said, smiling. And they really were. Sophia hugged the books like they were treasures, and Michael immediately started playing with the truck, making engine sounds that echoed through the house. You didn't have to do this, Patricia said softly as they watched the children play. I wanted to, Alexander replied, realizing he meant it. They sat on the terrace, watching Sophia teach Michael how to draw with the new pencils. The afternoon sun cast a golden light that made everything look more beautiful and serene. Can I ask you something? Alexander said after a moment of silence. Of course. Why here? Why did you choose this house? Patricia fell silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell. There was a young woman in town who told me about this house. She said it had been empty for years, but that before, it was a place where good things happened, that the owner used to help anyone in need. Alexander felt a tightness in his chest. His mother really did do that. Even when she had little, she always shared with those who had less. The young woman said that maybe this would be a safe place for someone in trouble, Patricia continued. And I really needed safety. Safety from what? Patricia hesitated, watching the children play. From my family. They wanted to force me to marry a man I don't know to settle some debts. When I refused and said I would take the children with me, they said it would be better if I disappeared for real. The coldness in her voice as she said this struck Alexander. The coldness in her. So you ran away. I ran away with them. They're the only family I have now. And the person who was going to marry you, is he looking for you? I don't know. I hope not. I hope he found someone else to solve his problems. Alexander watched Patricia watch the children. There was something fierce and protective in her gaze, like a mother defending her young. Don't you regret leaving everything behind? Don't regret what? She challenged him. Protecting 2 innocent kids, refusing to be sold off like cattle. Never. The conviction in her voice struck Alexander. He knew executives who didn't have half the determination he saw in this young woman. What if I got you a job? Something better for you. Something in the city. Patricia looked at him warily. Why, you don't even know me. Because... Alexander paused, searching for the right words. Because I think my mother would do the same. That answer seemed to satisfy Patricia. Your mother who lived here? Yeah, she died 5 years ago. She was a really good person. So why didn't you ever come back? The question was direct, no beating around the bush. Alexander appreciated the honesty. Because this place reminded me of things I wanted to forget. Poverty struggles. The feeling of having no control over my own life. And now, Alexander looked around. The house felt different with life inside it. Kids laughing, Patricia humming while folding clothes, the smell of home-cooked food drifting from the kitchen. Now, I don't know. It feels different. That night, Alexander left the house with more questions than answers. The next day, instead of going to the office, he went back to Bakersfield. And the day after that, too. Without even realizing it, he'd fallen into a routine. The week he'd given Patricia was coming to an end, but Alexander couldn't imagine evicting this family. With every passing day, he got more wrapped up in their stories, their daily struggles, the way they looked out for each other. It was on the 5th day that he got the call that would change everything. Mr. Harris. It was Patricia's voice calling from the village payphone. I need to speak with you. It's urgent. Alexander felt a knot in his stomach. What happened? He found me, the man my family wants me to marry. He's here in town asking about us. Alexander didn't hesitate. Stay inside the house. Lock everything up. I'm on my way. For the first time since meeting Patricia, Alexander broke the speed limit. When he got to the house, he found the three of them huddled in the living room, clearly terrified. Patricia was holding Michael on her lap while Sophia clung to her skirt. He came by, Patricia said, as soon as Alexander had walked in. He pounded on the door, screamed my name, said I was coming back whether I liked it or not. How did he know you were here? Some neighbor must have talked, small town, right? News travels fast. Alexander felt a rage he hadn't felt in years. The thought of someone threatening that family woke up primal instincts he didn't know he had. Is he still in town? I think so. He said he was coming back with my, brothers. That they sent him to drag us back. Your brothers? My blood brothers, the older ones. They support the marriage because they're getting paid. Alexander clenched his fists. How could a family sell their own sister? Look, he can't force you to do anything. You're an adult. You have the right to choose. You don't understand, Patricia said, tears in her eyes. Where I'm from, in my world, when the family decides something, there's not much you can do, especially if you're a woman. So, what do you want to do? I don't know. If we leave here, we've got nowhere to go. If we stay, he's just going to keep pushing. And I'm terrified of what he might do to the kids. Alexander looked at Michael and Sophia. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they could feel the fear in the air. You're staying, he said, making a decision. I'm going to fix this. How? Just leave it to me. Patricia looked him in the eyes, and she must have seen something that reassured her because she nodded. Thank you. Alexander spent the night at the house, sleeping on the couch to make sure the family was safe. In the morning, he had a serious talk with his lawyer. Dr. Sanders, I need you to explain something to me. What are the rights of a woman facing a forced marriage? Forced marriage. Alexander, that's a crime. The Constitution guarantees. I know it's a crime, but tell me, how do we protect someone who's being pressured by their own family? After talking with the lawyer, Alexander headed to Bakersfield to find the man who was threatening Patricia. It wasn't hard to find him. In a small town, strangers stand out. Robert Miller was a man in his 50s. Short and stocky, with the look of someone used to getting his way through intimidation. Alexander found him at the main bar in the city, loudly talking about his rights over Patricia. Are you Robert Miller? Alexander asked, walking up to the table. Who wants to know? My name is Alexander Harris. I need to speak with you about Patricia Nelson. Robert's eyes lit up with interest. Ah, so you know where she is. Excellent. Take me to her so I can pick her up. Sit down, Alexander said in a tone that brooked no argument. There was something about Alexander's posture, the way he dressed, the way he spoke, that made Robert obey instinctively. Listen closely to what I'm about to tell you, Alexander continued. Patricia is not marrying you. She doesn't want to. And in America, forced marriage is a crime. If you keep chasing her, I'm calling the police. Police? Robert let out a bitter laugh. I just say I'm looking for my girlfriend, and that her family owes me money. And I'll say you're threatening a woman and 2 children. That means jail time. And who are you to get involved? Alexander pulled a card from his pocket and placed it on the table. It was his business card listing his company name and all his titles. Robert read the card and his expression changed completely. You, you're the owner of Harris Developments, among other things, yes. Alexander's name was known throughout the region. Robert swallowed hard. Look, Don Alexander, I didn't know you were involved. Well, now you know. Patricia is under my protection. If you or anyone in your family goes near her again, you'll have to answer to me, understood? Robert nodded quickly. But what about the money her family owes me? How much the 15,000? Alexander pulled a checkbook from his pocket and wrote a check right then and there. Here, now you have nothing to do with Patricia anymore. But first, sign here. Alexander placed a piece of paper on the table. It was a document his lawyer had prepared stating that Robert renounced any claim over Patricia. Sign the papers and get out. Don't you ever come back. Ever come. Robert signed the papers without a fight. When Alexander got back to the house and told Patricia what had happened, she wept not from sadness but from pure relief. How can I ever thank you for this? She asked through her tears. You don't have to thank me for anything. Just stay as long as you like. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to hit that like button and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, especially since we're just getting started. Anyway, the days that followed were different. Without Robert's threat hanging over them, Patricia relaxed in a way Alexander hadn't seen before. She smiled more, played with the kids, and even sang while she cooked. The house transformed into a real home. Alexander found himself stopping by every single day. In the morning before heading to his office in Los Angeles, he'd swing by the house to have breakfast with the family. In the evening on his way back, he'd stop in again for dinner. Without even realizing it, his entire routine had changed. Don't you have a family of your own? Patricia asked one afternoon while they watched the kids playing in the yard. No, I never married. I never found the right person. Why not? Alexander thought about how to answer that. I guess I always thought love was a luxury. I thought I had to build my financial life first and worry about relationships later. And now I realize that maybe I've been looking at it wrong my whole life. Patricia smiled. Life is funny like that, isn't it? You plan one thing and life insists on doing something else. That's true. They sat in silence watching Michael, trying to teach Sophia how to play soccer with a ball made out of old socks. Can I ask you something? Alexander said. Of course. Are you afraid to get involved with anyone again after everything you've been through? Patricia thought about the question. I'm afraid of trusting the wrong person, but I'm not afraid of love itself. I think love is the only thing in this life that's actually worth it, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts, because the pain means it was real. Patricia's simple wisdom constantly amazed Alexander. In his corporate world, people used complicated words for simple things. Patricia did the exact opposite. It was that night that Alexander realized he was falling in love. It wasn't some dramatic movie-like moment. It was just watching Patricia tuck the kids in, singing a lullaby in her soft voice that he knew his life had changed forever. The following week, Alexander made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He took the house off the market. Alexander, have you lost your mind? His partner Edward said during a meeting. We are talking about a deal worth $2 million. I know what it's worth. So why are you backing out? Because I decided not to sell. But you said that house only held bad memories for you. The memories have changed. Edward looked at him like he'd completely lost it. This has something to do with that family living there, doesn't it? Alexander didn't answer, but the look on his face said it all. Alexander, for the love of God, don't tell me you're getting emotionally involved with a woman you barely even know. In just 2 weeks, I've gotten to know her better than anyone else in my entire life. That's ridiculous. Maybe it is, but that's how I feel. That afternoon, Alexander went over to the house to tell Patricia about his decision. I canceled the sale, he said bluntly. Patricia, who was sewing at the machine, stopped what she was doing. What? The house. I'm not selling it anymore. Good. Why? Alexander took a deep breath. Because I realized this place can still be a home. Just like it was when my mother lived here. Patricia looked at him in silence for a long moment. And what does that mean for us? It means you guys can stay if you want, as long as you like. Alexander, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, just think about it. Okay. Patricia nodded, still processing the news. That night, after the kids had gone to sleep, she and Alexander had a long talk out on the terrace. They talked about dreams, fears, and how life sometimes takes us down paths we never imagined. I'm scared, Patricia admitted. Of what? That I'm dreaming. That one day I'll wake up and find out all of this was just desperation on my part. It's not desperation, Alexander said. I feel it too. This connection, seriously, isn't it just pity for us? Patricia looked me in the eye. He turned toward her. This isn't pity. This is, I don't know what to call this. I just know I've never felt anything like it. They kissed for the first time right there on the terrace of the house where Alexander had grown up under the same stars his mother used to show him when he was a kid. The months that followed were full of discovery. Alexander learned what it meant to have a real family, not just the obligations or responsibilities, but the genuine joy of coming home to people who actually cared about him. Michael started calling him dad naturally without anyone suggesting it. Sophia, who was more reserved, took longer, but eventually she opened up to him too. Patricia bloomed like a flower that had finally found the right soil to grow in. Alexander completely remodeled the house, but was careful to keep its essence. He modernized the kitchen, fixed the roof, and painted the walls, but preserved the details that gave the place its personality. He built a room for each child and transformed the old storeroom into a sewing studio for Patricia. You don't need to sew for that shop anymore, he told her one morning. You can work for yourself, make the things you actually like. I like working, Alexander. I don't want to be supported. I'm not talking about supporting you. I'm talking about giving you the freedom to do the work you love. And so Patricia started her own business, sewing custom-made clothes for women in the area. In no time, she had more orders than she could handle. It was on one of those busy days that they got an unexpected visit. Alexander was playing with Michael in the yard when he heard Patricia shout from inside. He ran into the house and found her standing in the doorway staring at a man around 40 years old standing at the entrance. Who is it? Alexander asked quietly. My brother, Richard. The man stepped closer, clearly uncomfortable. Patricia, can I come in? I need to talk to you. About what? Patricia's voice was tense. About the family, about what happened. Alexander stepped up beside Patricia, a subtle protective gesture. This is my home, Patricia said. If you want to talk, we'll do it right here in front of him. Richard looked at Alexander clearly, trying to figure out who he was. All right, Patricia finally said. I came to apologize. Apologize for what we did, for the forced marriage, for kicking you out of the house. We were desperate because of the debts, but that doesn't justify what we did. Patricia stayed silent, processing her brother's words. And you're coming here now because I heard you're doing well. That you found someone who loves you, that the kids are being taken care of. And I realized we lost the best person in our family all because of greed. You're right, Patricia said without any bitterness. Yeah, you really did. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I regret it every single day. And the debts, they've been paid. The man who was supposed to marry you, someone paid him off and he backed down. Now we're starting over, trying to do things the right way. Patricia looked at Alexander, who gave a subtle nod, letting her know the decision was hers. Thank you for coming here and saying this, she finally said. It means something, but I can't just forget what happened. I understand. Maybe someday we can talk again, but not today. Richard nodded, waved to the children who were watching everything from the window, and left. Are you okay? Alexander asked after her brother was gone. It's weird, but I'm okay. I think I'd already forgiven them a long time ago. I just didn't know it. And how do you feel now? Free. Completely free. It was that very night that Alexander proposed to Patricia. It wasn't something planned. The words just tumbled out of his mouth while they were washing dishes together after dinner. Marry me, he said suddenly. Patricia almost dropped the plate she was drying. What Marry me. You, me, the kids. Let's be a real family. Alexander, I know it's soon. I know you might think it's rushing things, but I've never been so sure of anything in my life. Patricia put the dish towel on the table and turned toward him. Are you sure? You won't regret it when the passion fades. Patricia, what I feel for you isn't just passion. It's it's like I found my other half. Like being in this world finally makes sense. And the kids are already my children in my heart. I want to adopt them officially, give them my last name, take care of them forever. And Patricia started to cry, but they were tears of happiness. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want to marry you. The wedding was simple but perfect. They held the ceremony in the backyard decorated with flowers Patricia had grown in her garden. Michael was the ring bearer carrying the rings on a small cushion that Sophia had embroidered. There were few guests, but every one of them was special. Mrs. Teresa, the elderly neighbor who had told Patricia about the house, was the matron of honor. She cried through the whole ceremony, saying that she always knew good things happened in this house. After the civil ceremony, Alexander officially adopted Michael and Sophia. When the judge asked if they wanted to change their last name to Harris, Sophia answered without hesitation, "Yes, I do, Your Honor. Now we're a real family." Married life brought joys and challenges that neither of them expected. Patricia had to get used to a more comfortable financial life, but she always stuck to her principles of simplicity and generosity. Alexander learned that being a father wasn't just about providing financial support, but about being present in the small moments. Helping with homework, healing skinned knees, telling bedtime stories. Michael turned out to be an extremely affectionate and outgoing boy. He adapted quickly to the new life and always treated Alexander as if he were his biological father. Sophia, who was more introverted, took longer to open up completely, but when she did, she developed a special relationship with Alexander based on their shared passion for books. Patricia expanded her sewing business and became a respected small business owner in the region. She kept her prices affordable and always set aside time to do free work for families in need. Following the example she had learned from Alexander's mother, "It's important to give back," she would say. "We received a second chance. Other people deserve one too." Alexander was surprised to discover a vocation he never knew he had: teaching. He started by giving math lessons to Sophia and then to other kids in the neighborhood. In no time, he was organizing informal tutoring right in his own home. "My mom would be proud," he told Patricia one of those afternoons, watching 5 kids doing homework at the kitchen table. "She would be very proud," Patricia agreed. "You've honored her memory." The years passed, bringing small joys and big transformations. The house, which was once destined for abandonment, became a center of life and love. Neighbors would frequently show up to ask for advice, borrow sugar, or just chat on the porch. Michael grew up to be a responsible and studious boy, always ready to help others. Sophia developed a passion for reading that led her to dream of becoming a teacher. Patricia established herself as one of the most sought-after seamstresses in the region, but she never lost the simplicity that defined her. Alexander discovered that true wealth wasn't in his bank account, but in the laughter echoing through the house, in the family dinners, and in the nights he fell asleep holding Patricia, listening to the children's footsteps in the hallway. It was a Sunday afternoon, 5 years after the wedding, that Alexander was organizing papers in the office when he found a letter that Patricia had written to him on their first wedding anniversary but never delivered. "Alexander, sometimes I wake up in the early morning and just watch you sleep, trying to understand how life brought me here, how a woman who was running from her own family, desperate and hopeless, found true love in a house that looked abandoned. You transformed our lives in a way I never thought possible, not just because you gave us financial security, but because you gave us something much more valuable: the feeling of belonging somewhere, of being loved unconditionally." Michael asked me the other day if I remember what it was like before you showed up. I told him I do remember, but it feels like another life. It feels like we were different people. Thank you for seeing beyond our situation. Thank you for choosing to stay when you could have walked away. Thank you for turning a ruined house into a home full of love. I love you more than words can say, Patricia. Alexander read the letter 3 times, overcome with emotion. When Patricia got home from work that afternoon, he was waiting for her on the terrace, letter in hand. "You found it," she said, smiling. "Why did you never give it to me?" "Because I thought I was being too sentimental. You already knew how I felt." "I didn't know it like this. Not in these words." "It's beautiful. Every word is still true." They stood hugging on the terrace, watching the sunset over the property that had become so much more than just a house. It had become a symbol that second chances really do exist. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to leave a like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. It helps those of us just starting out a lot. Now, continuing on, 8 years after the wedding, when Michael was 11 and Sophia was 14, the Harris family received an unexpected proposal. A local TV producer had heard about their story and wanted to make a documentary about second chances and unconventional families. "I don't know if that's a good idea," Patricia said during dinner after Alexander told them about the proposal. "Our life isn't a show, but it could inspire other people," argued Sophia, always the thoughtful one, "to show that not every story has to end badly." "What do you think?" Alexander asked Michael. "I think we can help other families who went through what we went through," the boy said, surprising everyone with his maturity. After talking it over a lot, they decided to accept on the condition that they would have total control over the final content. The documentary, A Home of Family, aired 6 months later and had a much bigger impact than any of them expected. Hundreds of people wrote letters sharing their own stories of hardship and overcoming the odds. One letter in particular caught Patricia's attention. It was from an 18-year-old pregnant girl who had been kicked out of her home by her family for refusing to marry an older man. "Could we help her?" suggested Patricia. "How?" "She could stay here for a while until she gets sorted out." Alexander looked at Patricia with admiration. Even after so many years of safety and stability, she still thought about helping others first. "Are you sure it's a big responsibility?" "I'm sure. Isn't that how our family started, with someone offering shelter to someone in need?" And so Daniela, 18 years old and 6 months pregnant, moved into the guest room they had prepared specifically for situations like that. The house was once again filled with new energy, new challenges, and new joys. Daniela gave birth to a baby girl, Luz, and stayed in the house for 2 years while she finished her studies and got established professionally. When she finally moved into her own home, she left behind an extended family that would support her forever. "Our house has a calling," Alexander said to Patricia one night after Daniela moved out. "It attracts people who need a fresh start, just like your mother used to do," Patricia replied. The tradition continues, and in fact, it really did. In the following years, the Harris home temporarily housed an elderly woman who had lost her house in a fire, a young man aging out of the foster care system, and a single mother fleeing an abusive relationship. Every person who passed through there left their mark and took with them the certainty that there were still good people in the world. Michael graduated from high school with the best grades in his class and won a scholarship to study engineering. In his graduation speech, he spoke about chosen family and how love can transform anything. Sophia graduated as a teacher and returned to teach at the public school in town where she had studied. She specialized in children with learning difficulties, always remembering how Alexander had patiently taught her math in the house's kitchen. Patricia became a successful small business owner, but she never lost her perspective. She created a microloan program for women who wanted to start their own businesses, always offering more than just money, offering mentorship, emotional support, and the certainty that they weren't alone. Alexander, inspired by the work of his wife, created a foundation that offered temporary housing to vulnerable families. He bought several properties in the region and transformed them into transitional homes, always following the model they had developed at home. Not just shelter, but comprehensive support so people could rebuild their lives. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows on the same balcony where they had kissed for the first time. This time, there were more guests, the many people whose lives they had touched over the years. Mrs. Teresa, now in her 80-somethings, was the maid of honor again. In her speech, she said, "I always knew this house was special. Alexander's mother worked miracles here, and now he and Patricia continue to make them happen. They aren't supernatural miracles, they are miracles of the human heart. Michael, now 16 years old and almost Alexander's height, gave a speech that moved everyone. When I was little, I didn't understand why some kids had blood parents and others like Sophia and me had parents of the heart. Now, I understand that it doesn't matter how a family is formed. What matters is the love that exists inside it. Alexander may not have fathered me, but he raised me. Patricia may not have given birth to me, but she gave me life. This family taught me that love isn't about DNA, it's about choice. And I choose you both every day. That night, after all the guests had left Alexander and Patricia stood alone on the balcony just as they had done every night for 10 years. Any regrets? Patricia asked jokingly. Just one, Alexander replied. Which one? I should have come back to this house much sooner. Maybe you weren't ready before. Maybe you needed to live through everything you did to be ready to find us. Could be. Sometimes I think my mother knew that one day I would return, that I would find my family here. She knew, Patricia said with conviction. Mothers always know these things. They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the night out in the countryside. Familiar noises drifted out from inside the house. Michael busy with some invention in his room. Sophia reading late into the night, and the kitchen clock ticking away the time. Patricia. Yes. Thank you. For what? For teaching me that a home isn't a place. It's the people we love. For giving me a family. For turning this house into a place where miracles happen. The miracles were always here, Patricia said. You just needed to come back home to find them. And so on the porch of the house where it all began, surrounded by the love of their chosen family, Alexander and Patricia continued writing their story, a story proving that sometimes the best beginnings are born from the most unexpected endings, and that an empty house can become the most love-filled home in the world. The property Alexander almost sold became the heart of a new family tradition. Every year on the day they met, they threw a party to celebrate not only their love, but the idea that second chances really do exist for those with the courage to embrace the unexpected. The children grew up knowing that they were loved unconditionally, not in spite of their history, but because of it. They learned that family isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's not about having everything, but giving everything. And Alexander, who once thought wealth was measured in money, discovered that the richest man in the world was the one with a family who loved him, a house full of laughter, and the certainty that no matter what happened, he would never be alone again. The love story between Alexander and Patricia became a legend in the city, but for them it was always simply the life they chose to build together, one day at a time, with lots of love, patience, and the unshakable faith that the best miracles are the ones we create with our own hands and hearts. Years passed, and the tradition of helping struggling families grew stronger. The Harris house became known throughout the region as a safe haven, a place where desperate people could find not just shelter, but hope. Patricia developed a special program for women who had gone through situations similar to her own. She offered not only temporary housing, but professional training courses, psychological support, and above all, living proof that it was possible to completely rebuild one's life. Every woman who passes through here carries a piece of our story, Patricia would say during the weekly meetings she organized, and leaves a piece of hers behind. That way, we're creating a network of strong women who support each other. Alexander, for his part, expanded his work with young people. He created a business mentorship program for kids who were aging out of the shelter system or who came from broken homes. He taught them that success wasn't measured just in money, but in the positive impact on other people's lives. Michael graduated as an engineer and came back to work at his father's company, but with a specific mission: to develop projects for affordable housing that followed the transitional living model the family had created. His first project was a housing complex that included community spaces, collective gardens, and vocational training centers. I want every family living here to have the same opportunity we had, he would say during his project presentations. A place that isn't just a shelter, but a starting point for a better life. When Sophia became a renowned educator specializing in inclusive education, she developed special teaching methods for children who had gone through family trauma, always remembering her own experience of finding an escape and growth within books. On Alexander and Patricia's 15th wedding anniversary, the celebration was different. Instead of an intimate party, they organized a huge gathering with all the families they had helped over the years. Daniela, the first young woman they took in, was now a nurse and brought her daughter Luz, a bright 13-year-old girl. Miss Carmen, the elderly woman who lost her house in the fire, had become the adopted grandmother to several neighborhood kids. Javier, the young man who aged out of the foster system, now ran an NGO for at-risk teens. Just look at what we've achieved together, Patricia said with emotion, watching the courtyard filled with people whose lives had intertwined through that house. My mom would be so proud, murmured Alexander, remembering the simple woman who planted the first seeds of generosity in that place. During the celebration, a surprise moved everyone. Richard, Patricia's brother, who had shown up years ago apologizing, arrived with his family. In recent years, they had slowly rebuilt their relationship, and he had become an advocate for women facing domestic violence in his own city. Patricia taught me that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the past determine the future, he said during his brief speech. She also saved me in her own way. Patricia hugged her brother, overcome with emotion. It had taken years to achieve a healthy relationship again, but the perseverance and unconditional love she learned from Alexander made even that possible. When night fell and the guests left, the family gathered on the terrace just like they always did. Michael and Sophia, now adults but still living at home, while establishing their careers, joined their parents for their nightly ritual of chatting about the day. Can I ask a question I've always wanted to ask? Said Sophia. Of course, Alexander replied. Did you really not know you were falling in love with Mom from day one? Because it was obvious to us. Alexander and Patricia looked at each other and laughed. Was it that obvious? Alexander asked. Dad, you came here every day with lame excuses, Michael said. I came to check on the house. I came to see if you're okay. I brought some things. Nobody bought those stories, and Mom would get all nervous when she knew you were coming, Sophia continued. She'd change her clothes 3 times, do her hair, rehearse conversations. I did not do that, Patricia protested, blushing. Yes, you did, the 2 children said in unison, laughing. Okay, fine, maybe I did a little bit, Patricia admitted. But it was love at first sight, at least on my part. Mine too, said Alexander. It just took me a while to accept what I was feeling. And what about us? Michael asked. When did you guys decide you wanted to be our parents forever? Alexander thought back to the very first day. He finally said, From the moment I saw you playing in the yard with those makeshift toys, you had already stolen my heart. I just didn't know it yet. For me, it was when Michael called you uncle for the first time, said Patricia. I saw your face right then, and I knew you'd fallen in love with all 3 of us at once. That's true, Alexander admitted. That day I realized I didn't want a life without you all anymore. They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own memories of that time of discovery and change. Do you regret anything? Asked Sophia. Regret running away from my blood family, Patricia replied. Never. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And you, Dad, do you regret canceling the sale of the house? Sophia, taking that house off the market was the smartest move I ever made. This house, this family, you are my greatest treasure. And if none of this had happened, continued Michael, always the philosopher of the family, if you 2 had never met. Patricia and Alexander looked at each other. I'd probably be a rich, lonely man, said Alexander. I'd have everything money can buy, but nothing that really matters. And I'd be a brave woman raising 2 kids all alone, said Patricia. We'd survive, but we never would have known this complete happiness. So was it destiny? Sophia asked. I don't know if it was destiny, Patricia answered. I think it was a series of right choices. I chose bravery when I ran away. Alexander chose compassion when he let us stay. We both chose love when we could have chosen fear. And you kids chose trust when you could have chosen distrust, Alexander added, looking at Michael and Sophia. You accepted a stranger into your lives. You were never a stranger to us, said Michael. From day one, we felt like you belonged here. That conversation on the terrace became one of the family's most cherished memories. Years later, when Michael and Sophia had their own children, they would tell this story to the kids, explaining how sometimes the best families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. The house remained a refuge for people in need. As Alexander and Patricia got older, Michael and Sophia gradually took over the responsibility of keeping the tradition alive. They created an official foundation with a professional structure, but they always kept the personal, loving essence that defined their parents' work. By the time she was 50, Patricia had become a regional leader in working with women in vulnerable situations. Alexander, at 65, was still running his company, but he dedicated most of his time to social work and mentoring young entrepreneurs. For their 20th wedding anniversary, they took a special trip. They went back to the city where Patricia was born, not to reconcile with the past, but to help other women who were living through situations similar to what she had faced. It feels strange being here, said Patricia as they walked through the streets of her childhood. It feels like that was in another life. That was in another life, Alexander replied. You're a completely different person from the woman who ran away from here 20 years ago. We're all different people now. They visited the house where Patricia had grown up and met the family living there now. It was a young single mother with 3 kids struggling to survive on odd jobs. Can I help? Patricia offered, introducing herself. The conversation that followed changed that family's life. Within a few weeks, the young mother was participating in Patricia's training programs, and her children had won scholarships to the school Sophia ran. Do you realize you're doing the same thing you did with us 20 years ago? Alexander remarked on the drive back. What do you mean, offering more than material help? Offering hope. I learned from you, Patricia smiled. You taught me that helping people isn't about giving money. It's about believing in them. Actually, it was you who taught me that from the very first day. Whenever they returned home, they found a surprise. Michael had organized a surprise party with all the families they'd helped over the years. The patio was decorated with photos documenting 2 decades of love and solidarity. We wanted to show you the impact you've had on so many people's lives, Michael explained. I don't know if you have any idea how many lives you've touched. It was impressive. There were over 100 people at the party each, with a story of resilience connected in some way to that house and that family. Children who had grown up, young people who had graduated, women who had rebuilt their lives and families who had found stability. This is the true legacy that you built, Sophia said during her speech. It's not houses or businesses. It's transformed lives. Dreams come true, futures that exist because you believed in people when they needed it most. Patricia couldn't hold back her tears. We just did what anyone would do, she said. No, Mom, Sophia replied softly. You did what anyone should do, but what few actually do. You opened your hearts and your home to strangers. You risked your own happiness to give a chance for happiness to others. That night, after everyone left, Alexander and Patricia sat alone on the terrace for the first time in months. The party had been beautiful, but they always appreciated the moments of shared silence. If I met you at 20 years old, do you think it would have worked between us? Patricia asked suddenly. No, Alexander answered honestly. At 20, I was too ambitious, too focused on making money. I wouldn't have known how to recognize your worth. And I was too naive, too dependent on my family's opinions. I wouldn't have had the courage to fight for what I wanted. So we met at the right moment. Exactly the right moment. When you were ready to be the man I needed, and I was ready to be the woman you deserved. Do you think we'd still be happy if we hadn't had this whole mission of helping other people? Patricia thought about the question. I think so, but it would be a smaller kind of happiness. More selfish. What gave our lives meaning was discovering that love. Real love is the kind that overflows. It can't just be kept inside the house. My mother always used to say something that I only fully understand now, Alexander said. Happiness shared is happiness multiplied. Your mother was a wise woman. She was. And she chose the right place to plant the seeds of generosity. This house has always been special. No, Alexander. The house became special because of the people living in it. First your mother, then us. The magic isn't in the walls. It's in the love we grow inside here. They stood there embracing, watching the stars shine over the property that had become so much more than just a house. It had become a symbol that miracles happen when people choose to love instead of fear, to give instead of hoard, to include instead of exclude, instead of Patricia. Yes, if you could go back in time and change anything about our story, what would you change? Patricia didn't hesitate, not for a second. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of uncertainty, It all brought us here. If we changed anything, we'd run the risk of not having exactly this life, exactly this family, exactly this happiness. Even the bad parts, the forced marriage, the escape, the fear, especially the bad parts, that was what taught me to cherish the good times. That was what made me strong enough to build this life with you. Alexander gently kissed Patricia's forehead. I love you. I love you too. And I love the life we've built together. And so on the terrace of the house where it all began, two hearts that found each other when they needed it most continued writing their love story. A story proving that no matter how hard the beginning is, it's always possible to create a happy ending when you have love, courage, and faith in the transforming power of human generosity. The night wore on, but they stayed there holding each other, listening to the familiar sounds of their home full of life and stories. Inside, they could hear Michael working on his projects, Sophia preparing her lessons for the next day, and the soft ticking of the kitchen clock marking the precious moments of a life lived with purpose and love. In that moment, Alexander knew with absolute certainty that he was the richest man in the world, not because of his bank account, but because of the true wealth he had built. A close-knit family, a home filled with love, and the certainty that his life had made a difference. And Patricia, looking at the man who had transformed her desperate escape into a journey of love and purpose, knew she had made all the right choices. Every brave choice, every moment of trust, every act of faith had led her exactly where she was meant to be. In the arms of the love of her life, surrounded by the family she chose, to build in a house where miracles happened every day through the simple act of unconditional love. The end. Now tell me what you thought of this story and let us know where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, please leave your honest thoughts in the comments. Do you think Alexander and Patricia made the right decisions? We'd love to read your opinion. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on other exciting stories.